Welcome to the Growth and Influence podcast. My name is Andrew Schultz, and today I need your help crafting and launching my personal brand. Over the last 18 months, as I've worked to create a brand that I can use to make a positive impact on the world through things that I share and through the business that I'm building, I've learned a couple of important lessons. And number one is that you can know who you are, but still struggle to communicate that in a way that serves other people or that they understand. And number two, you can elevate who you are. You can expand who you are because you're growing and learning new things, but can fail to give those things to other people in a way that serves them as well. And so today I want to share the pillars of my personal brand that have shaped my journey. And I'm going to do it in the form of my origin story. I'm going to tell you the story of how I got to where I am today and the work that I'm doing at this phase of my life. So I hope that sounds interesting. I would love your comments. Let's jump in. Welcome to the Growth and Influence podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Schultz, and this podcast is about the fascinating convergence of two massive movements or principles in our economy: persuasive marketing and selling, and personal development. The principles that lead to personal growth and happiness are not always aligned with the principles of persuasive marketing, and yet almost anything that can serve people and the world has to be marketed. We're in search of answers. Let's go. All right, so we're going to start this story at a critical point. I was fired from the last two jobs that I held. And it was January 2023. I was fired for the second time. And both times it was for the same reason. But to understand why, we need to go back to 2016. I was working in a really well-paying job at Microsoft. And I left that job to pursue a dream. It was for the second time in my career that I had left the employ of a lucrative job to start my own company. And I didn't have a clear plan, but I knew one thing. The bureaucracy of that 100,000 person organization was not something that I could thrive in or that I felt any purpose in working in anymore. And so for the next 2.5 years, I hustled through several ideas. I worked to create, several businesses and see if I could make money with those businesses, trying to launch them into the world. Ultimately, never launched anything successful, but I kind of, I made do and we got by. And I had determined never to work for anybody else again. I was like, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my career. But one morning I woke up with a surprising feeling. I had this feeling that it's time to go get a job again. And I didn't know what to make of that. But this resistance that I had to ever going back to the corporate world was gone. And so I need to tell you a little bit of background on that. Months earlier, I had lunch with Ryan Smith, the founder of Qualtrics. He now owns the Utah Jazz. And we know each other because the first job that I had, I would say out of college, but I was actually even still in college when I had this job. I worked with Ryan and his co-founder, Stu Orgill, who is my friend, at Qualtrics when it was only 9 people. And it was in Ryan's dad's basement. And so I used to sit right next to Ryan in the basement there at his desk. And so we know each other, and I'm not on a speed dial or anything, but we ran into each other kind of randomly once, and he said, you should come and have lunch with me. And so I did. And he gave me some advice that it really stuck with me, because he was talking about what would people ask him all the time, what's your next thing? How are you going to do this again? And he's like, you know what? This is awesome, but it's hard. And if my advice for you is that you should really look at a sales job. Sales job gives you the same level of autonomy, the same opportunities for growth. It's just as lucrative most of the time, except for some exceptions that happen, him being one of them. And so coming from someone who built a billion-dollar company plus, a multi-billion-dollar company from his dad's basement, that advice really meant a lot to me. It stuck with me. And so I had worked through this last entrepreneurial idea that I was having that I really wanted to prove out. And it turned out that it didn't really launch. And so at this point, I was kind of unfettered. I hadn't cracked the entrepreneurial code. And so going and getting a sales job, it was surprisingly not that distasteful to me at that time. So, I've always been in my career, I've always been about big results, big ideas, big ambitions. It's it's what has fueled my interest in the work that I've done. Otherwise, nothing really was able to hold my interest for very long. And I think that probably comes from watching how Ryan and Stu operated in that first job that I ever really had in the real business world. And so I didn't want to just play a role. I wanted to achieve something uncommonly great. So when I woke up that morning with that urge to find a job, I knew it was time. I knew I was going to go into sales. I wanted the high pressure environment. I wanted the ability to overachieve. I wanted to know when I was overachieving, and I wanted to be very clear by how much I was overachieving. And so within 3 weeks, I had a job from a SaaS company. And the day that I signed that offer letter that they gave me, 3 weeks after I started looking, my wife came into my office. Her name is Camille. And she walked in and she had this horrified look on her face. And I was like, what's wrong? And she was like, she showed me a picture on her phone. She'd just taken a pregnancy test. Now, I knew nothing about this, but she had been a little worried. She took a pregnancy test and she was pregnant. And she wasn't horrified because we don't love kids. We do. We already had 4. The youngest was 7, and we thought we were done. And so this was 7 years later. We're going to get this kid, number 5 coming along. And it was totally unexpected. And as someone who believes deeply in God, who has a relationship with God, I now understood why he had prompted me to go back and get a job, why he had changed my heart and my mind on that overnight, because we needed stability. I had not yet cracked the entrepreneurial code. And actually, my wife almost died giving childbirth to that child. Everything went well in the delivery. She did it like without any medication. So no anesthesia. And so it was a natural childbirth, but it was at the hospital. And the nurses had kind of messed something up. And they hadn't, there's this process after a woman has a baby, they will like massage her stomach to push out all the blood and the blood clots so that new clots can form and stop the bleeding that's happening inside the uterus. Well, they had done that a little bit wrong. They had missed some or something like that. And she lost about 1/3 of the blood in her body before they realized it. She almost passed out. And they had to go into this emergency procedure and give her a blood transfusion the next day. And so it was really good to have the stability of a job, and insurance, really good medical insurance at that time. So I knew why. And I grinded in these sales jobs for 4 years. I had 3 different roles during this time. And I threw myself into sales with everything I had. I was the kind of salesperson who was spending money on my own development, buying educational courses to help me be a better seller. When my company gave me training, I went all in on it. I practiced it. I made it a procedure. And I just struggled the whole 4 years. I wanted to 2x my quota, be a top performer, mentor other people to learn how to do those things once I'd figured it out. And despite my effort, I almost never hit my quota in those 4 years. And so in one role, I was hired to open Utah as a new territory. This company that hired me thought that Utah which was traditionally a very mid-market economy, they thought that it had grown enough to where it was ready for their large enterprise offerings. And it's true, we do have enterprise companies with a presence here now, but they're not the headquarters. You don't get those accounts in your territory if you're covering Utah, because those aren't headquarters offices. Like Workday has their name on a big building downtown in Salt Lake, but Workday's headquartered somewhere else. It's somebody else's account. And so it turns out they were wrong. The economy here was not ready for their large enterprise offerings. That role didn't work out. In another role, as I was hired into this company, I was told 70% of the reps were hitting quota. The company was on fire. It was just such a fast-growing company. It was a rocket ship, and it would be my privilege to work here. I got inside and I realized that on the mid-market team that I had been hired into, that out of roughly 35 reps, all of them were struggling. At the end of that year, only 1 had hit quota. Another one was close. And then if you follow the rankings downward, you quickly got to below 40% attainment. Like most of that org was below 40% quota attainment for the year. We had a whole month where 35 people didn't sell a single sale, didn't close a single deal. And most of the people that were hired with me never sold a single deal all year. The territories were horrible. They were poorly thought out. We were selling into industries that this company had never sold to before and didn't know how. And they thought we would figure it out, and we didn't. So that was a really challenging year. At the third role, I was hired to sell a new product that this company was launching into market. They were really excited about this new product. They thought the market for this was just so ripe and it was going to do super well. And it turned out that it did not. We worked on it for 9 months. We worked hard. There were like 8 of us trying to sell this product. And sales were few and far between. And at the end of that 9 months, they disbanded our team. And then a few months later, they discontinued the product. And so as I looked at this, in January of 2023, I'm on a PIP. And if you don't know what that is, it's a performance improvement plan. And it's not that really. It's a set of things that you have to do or you're going to be fired at the end of the month. Second job in a row where I was on a performance improvement plan. And the company wanted numbers that I would, over the course of a year, I'd never come close to achieving these, like not even close. And so I knew that, this was the end of this job too. And I spent that month on the PIP searching, not just for a new job, but for like a purpose, because I'd really started to doubt my effectiveness and my ability and my worth as a salesperson and just as a professional in general, as somebody who could provide for my family and somebody who could do the big things that I'd always wanted to do in my career. And that's when it hit me. I looked at these companies that I'd worked for, and I realized that because the situation had always been so suboptimal, I realized that no matter how big the company, no matter how impressive the logo or their track record or their market recognition or any of these things, no matter how nice, the building that they work in, where they have offices, they don't have it figured out. You think they have everything figured out, but they don't. They have a few things figured out. They have just enough figured out for this business to be as successful as it is, but nothing else is figured out. There's so much inside those companies that is broken, ineffective, completely inefficient, and missing new trends in the market, missing the best new strategies that could help them succeed at the things they're doing. There's so much that just doesn't work inside these companies. And so when you're in there, you're also just kind of a cog in a machine. I knew that I was a row in a spreadsheet, and that row didn't look as good as the numbers that they wanted it to be at, and so they put me on a PIP and fired me. And so that's when I realized one of these main kind of pillars that's defining what I do moving forward. And that is that you have to trust your individual potential. Don't trust institutional promises. Trust your individual potential. Don't trust institutional promises. Because a lot of us, maybe some of you listening to this in January 2023, you had been failed by institutional promises also. You were left out in the cold when companies had made promises to you about where they were going and what your future would look like there and how they were going to take care of you and how they were a family and how you were going to have so much time to become a ping pong champion or a foosball champion while working there and living your best life. And then they just fired you when they had made decisions that led to poor business outcomes, when they had failed to anticipate economic changes and things like that. So don't let the grandeur of a company blind you to the reality that they don't have it figured out. The logo, the market recognition, the investment money, none of it matters. None of it means that they have it figured out. And as an individual with skills and drive and ambition and a strong work ethic, you can show up and you can help these companies do things that they can't do without you. Whether that's as an employee or as a service provider, you can do things that are better than what they're already doing. And so that's my first brand pillar. Trust your individual potential, doubt institutional promises. trust your individual potential, doubt institutional promises. The rest is a mess that you can fix if you just show up the right way. So it was during this January where I was really doing all this soul searching that I came across this Tony Robbins event. It was called the Unshakable Challenge. Tony Robbins runs it every year, at least he has for the last few years. I had a different name this last January. But it's this free event. He calls it a challenge. It's 4 days. You show up and he does his thing for 3 hours each day. And I didn't know if I could trust him. Like I was into personal development. I'd spent a lot of money on personal development already at this point in my career. But I didn't know Tony that well. And he was so big and such a big name. I didn't know like how much is he actually here for me? Or how much of this is just like a big show that he's running to sell me the next program. And but I felt the same urge I had felt 4 years earlier when it was like, it's time to go back and get a sales job. I felt like this was important. So I went to that event and it started a lot of incredibly valuable transformation in my life. But the thing that made the biggest difference to me during that event was something that Tony said about making your life a gift to the world. And when he said those words, I was like, there was so much dissonance between that concept that he was talking about and the experience that I had had with my work over the last 4 years. My relationship with work had grown cold and transactional and lifeless and inhuman. I was there to produce numbers. I was there to produce results. I just wanted to see my name move up the rankings, in the sales rankings. And I enjoyed relationships with clients, but oftentimes I felt like I was trying to take something from them when I sold to them instead of trying to give them something. And this is especially true when there was all this pressure to perform in a company that was not doing well. And they were like, just get some sales, just get some sales. So in that moment, as I was thinking about how I could make my work a gift to the world, something clicked. I realized that I could spend my time, talents, and energy doing something that would serve the world and that would also create a business for me where I could make money and provide for my family and do fulfill the responsibility that I had. Previous to that, it always felt like, okay, work was for if you divide, yourself and your motivations up into 3 categories, the ego, the body, and the spirit. I think this is a useful way to communicate this. A friend and I were just talking about this, and I realized this fit perfectly here. Your body wants to feel good, your ego wants to look good, and your spirit wants to do good. And I had realized that so much of my entire work life, I had always just compartmentalized it in a way where it was dominated by the body and the ego. It was about making money to provide, survive, take care of physical needs so that I and my family could feel good. And it was about looking good for the ego, wanting to be successful and wanting other people to see that I was successful. And so in that moment, I realized that I could actually let my work be driven by the spirit that wants to do good. And that by doing so, the needs of, the other things would be taken care of, but I could drive it in such a different way. And so the tension I kind of been carrying and this coldness that I had inside regarding my work, it just kind of melted. And I felt this expanding feeling when I thought of the concept of actually using my talents to serve. And so I stopped applying for jobs and I started looking for ways to make an impact right away. And there were 2 paths that I saw here. There was a marketing path, because back in 2017, I had been in the inner circle of a guy named Russell Brunson. I'll talk about him in a minute, but he's one of the highest converting and most skilled marketers in the world, and has built a SaaS business that on a bootstrapped budget without any investment money that most VC-backed companies, they cannot even come close to the growth rate and the success that this company has had. The other one was personal development. I just mentioned a minute ago that I had spent a lot of money on personal development and coaching in my career. I just had this experience with Tony Robbins, which had kind of reignited a lot of those things for me. And I kind of played with these two possibilities for about a year, doing both of them a little bit. And I ultimately decided to pursue the marketing agency path as my main focus. But as a lot of you know, if you've listened to this podcast before, I'm building that business with the desire and the plan and the commitment to go and build a nonprofit that helps young people who are coming from emotional, mental, spiritual, or physical poverty with coaching and personal development, not therapy, not social work, coaching. And so that is still very much a huge part of my drive and what I do. But as I reflected on this, I came to understand, all of these feelings that I've been describing to you. They kind of coalesced into this second brand pillar, this thing that's really important to me to communicate to you and to integrate everything that I do in my business. And that is to integrate purpose and profit. Because if you fulfill your purpose, the profits will come. And when your work aligns with your mission, it's not just a job. It's not just a career. It's not just a business. It is a calling. And that alignment creates a force that's far more powerful than if you're just pursuing the selfish outcomes that this thing could produce for you. When you are aligned with your mission, it transforms how you show up, how you engage with others, and ultimately how successful you can be. So I built this marketing agency on principles I learned from Russell Brunson. As I mentioned, he's one of the highest converting marketers in the world, but SaaS companies don't really use most of what he does, even though he's built a SaaS company that grew to, I may be saying the wrong numbers here, but I think it was $300 million or maybe it was $100 million in annual recurring revenue in 3 years. And that's a growth rate that is just remarkable and incredible. And it's grown beyond that since then. That was back when I was working with him in 2017, around that time. And so I bring these skills and these principles and marketing strategies to SaaS. And we've driven results when others couldn't. In 2023, I started working with sales influencers. That was the original market that I worked with. Sales influencers, people who are big on social media, and they sell courses and trainings to their audience that they have on social media. And in 2023, you think about who their market is in 2023, most of the people, the guys I worked with are not selling corporate trainings to the companies. They're selling to the individual salespeople who pay for these things out of their pocket, similar to what I had done when I was a salesperson. And in 2023, salespeople everywhere, their entire market had either been fired, laid off, or they were afraid that they were next. And the fear in that space was palpable. And everybody was suffering from it. Nobody felt secure. So think about how hard it is to sell your stuff into that market during that time. And they were struggling. They were having big problems they had seen their growth slow. They were seeing challenges in the business. They were wondering what they could do. These were smaller businesses. And so, they couldn't see declines in revenue for very long without really being in trouble. These are the results that we drove in 2023. We ran an email campaign for one of these businesses. It was 7 emails. It went out over the course of 8 or 9 days. There's a list of about 7,000 people on that list. And we booked over 50 sales calls from those 7 emails and closed over $60,000 in revenue in the course of 3 weeks. All of that happened in 3 weeks, from the first email that we sent to the last of those sales that closed. We did that same kind of email sequence with another business. This was a larger business, and they had an SDR in the mix here as well. But we ran a 7 email sequence to a list of about 10,000 people, and we generated $300,000 in revenue for that business, about 40 sales calls, again, within 1 month. And then finally, I helped one of these guys script a webinar that in 1 hour, we booked sales calls that led to over $50,000 in sales. They actually they failed to track the numbers properly, and so it was unclear, but it was between $50,000 and $60,000 in one webinar, which would be somewhere between $600 and $800 average revenue per attendee on that webinar. So that's a very valuable webinar. In 2024, we shifted our focus to serving tech and SaaS companies. And based on the brand pillars that I've shared with you and my own personal professional values, we don't do average. That's one of the things that we're very focused on in this agency. Our marketing is bold, it pushes boundaries, and it makes people uncomfortable because it works. Not because it's inappropriate, but because it's bold and because it's different than what most people do. Average is what most companies do. And in my experience in SaaS, where I've spent almost all of my career, average is selling a software license. Bold is selling a result. Average is selling a brand that for somebody to fall in love with. And honestly, if you're selling B2B software, good luck creating a brand that people fall in love with. But bold is giving your prospects a new identity for themselves to fall in love with. We're about pushing leads down the funnel fast. This is where we engage. We engage at the point where you have leads, but not enough of them are moving through the lead pipeline and the lead funnel into the sales pipeline or into whatever step you want them to take next. So for a product-led growth company, we're all about taking the free users who are really just leads and turning them into paid users. If you're a sales-led growth company, we're all about taking the leads that you're generating and turning them into higher qualified leads in the sales pipeline that move through at a faster rate and at a larger volume and are more likely to progress further down the sales process and close as net new customers. Most marketing teams play it safe. And let's be clear, we're not for everybody. We don't cater to the status quo. And so if you're waiting for these economic challenges that we're facing to blow over so you can go back to what you've always done, then we're definitely not for you. Decisions that are made by marketing organizations are often made by committee, and that leads to bland, uninteresting marketing that is easily ignored. We defy that. We create marketing that stands out and gets results. And it's not always comfortable, but it's what works. If you value comfort over results, then we're not for you. But if you're ready to break free from the noise and do something that really moves the needle, that slams the needle against the top end of the performance gauge, then we're a great agency to help you convert those leads at a higher rate. And this is the third brand pillar that I wanted to share today here at the end. Big standards lead to big thinking, which leads to big actions, which leads to big results. You can take the same amount of work and you can apply it towards goals that are mediocre, incrementally better than what you did last time. Or you can take that work and apply it to goals that are massively bigger than what you've done next time or what you did the last time. And those big goals or those big standards will lead to an entirely different kind of thinking. It will lead to big thinking. And big thinking leads to different kind of action, big action, which leads to different kind of results, big results. And those are the principles that this marketing agency is founded on and that my personal brand is founded on. Big results. We don't do incremental stuff. We don't just run programs. We're doing things to produce amazing results that would have anybody who heard about them turn their head and want to learn more. So we like to push the boundaries, take risks, and we like to get the results that others only dream about. We're not just here to get you noticed. We're here to transform how you connect, how you sell, and how you win. So that's my origin story. And I'm so interested. Number one, did you find value in that story? Did it serve you in ways that can help your life get better in some way? And if it did, then I think it's the right story. And I think I've got the right brand pillars. But I'd love to hear your feedback. Did it serve you? Was it interesting, engaging? Did it inspire you? And if you were in a business where you were in a position to bring in a marketing agency, Did it give you an idea of, what we do, and would you want to work with us? Those are the questions I have. And you can make comments on this podcast episode on Spotify. So if that's where you're listening to this, please comment. Let me know. What do you think about this origin story? And I hope to see you next time here on the Growth and Influence podcast. Thank you so much for being here today. Have a great day.